We'll be talking about the post-pandemic scenes of the digital nomadic community. Do we have Shashi with here? Yeah, Shashi's here. I think it's muted.
Sorry, yes, I'm here.
Yeah, hi Shashi. And Mayur, I think that's muted. Oh,
Hi, Indrani.
hi
Mayur here.
Mayur. So we'll wait for another minute or two for others to join us, and then we shall start our session.
Indrani, are you going to be moderating it?
Yes, I'll be the moderator.
Do you have a flow in mind?
Yes, I do have it. So we'll be discussing about the general scenario of the digital nomadic community right now. Am I audible?
You're not coming in very clear, Indrani.
Just a minute. Am I audible now?
You are, but it's not coming in very clear. There's a lot of back.
Is it better right now? Or the same?
The same.
I'll try it. Just a minute. You hear me now? I think it's somebody's mic which is causing a trouble.
That's fine. This is fine.
There's some issue with Amit's audio also, so he cannot join us with audio. He'll be with us on the text.
That's okay.
We'll be starting today's Reconnect now. I hope everybody's mic is working. Mayur and Shashi, right?
Yes, I'm live. I'm good.
Mayur, just a sound check.
Yeah, hi.
Yeah, hi.
I'm good.
Yes, all is clear.
We have with us Andrew as well from Insured Nomads. Hi, Andrew.
I had muted myself just in case any noise was my background noise, but I do not believe I have any, unless it's noticeable when I mute and unmute.
Okay, so we have some guests with us. We'll be starting the reconnect. And we have Shashi and Mayur with us. And they are very, like, they contribute to the digital nomadic community. And they have their own co-living spaces as well, the Draper Starter House and Nomad Cow. So I would like Shashi to introduce himself and tell us more about the Draper Startup House. Shashi, you are not audible to us.
Now I'm audible.
Yeah, you're audible now.
So my name is Shashi. I'm one of the co-founders of the Draper Startup House, and Draper Startup House is an interesting model that sits at the intersection of hospitality and entrepreneurship ecosystem building. So we have built these entrepreneurship residencies or co-living spaces or hostels, whatever one might want to call it, in 10 different parts of the 10 different countries around the world. So our main focus is to, our mission is to sort of enable 1 million entrepreneurs in the next 10 years to come. And we are backed by the Silicon Valley venture capital network called the Draper Venture Network. We do multiple things in the valley and around the world. It's a $4 billion fund and has about 24 different countries that it operates in. The network is LPs in some spaces and direct investment in some countries. So it's got a very strong, sort of an agenda to develop entrepreneurship. Apart from the fund itself, it does a lot of developmental work as well in terms of ecosystems and education for entrepreneurs. So our spaces sort of act as a hospitality space, a micro university, and also a place where people can raise venture capital. So broadly, this is what we do. I'm based out of Lisbon right now, but I manage the business for Draper Startup House in Europe with my co-founders here and also in India. Yeah, I mean, that's the story.
That's amazing. Glad to hear from you, Shashi. Now we'd like to introduce Mr. Mayur, who is also the founder of Nomad Now, and he's a digital nomad himself. Mayur, over to you.
Yeah, hi all. Thanks, Indrani. Uh, I've been working remotely since 2014. Since 2015, I have been a digital nomad. Uh, so over the years, I've seen the digital nomad ecosystem and the movement evolving. I also moderate the largest digital nomad group on Facebook,
Oh, nice.
digital nomads around the world. Um, while being in Southeast Asia, I thought, okay, there are a lot of digital nomads in Southeast Asia, but India is such a big country, diverse country. Why are not they coming here? So with that in mind, I started Remote Explorers first to run retreats for digital nomads back in 2017. Uh, and while running retreats, I realized that it's too time consuming and painstaking to, run ad hoc retreats, set up the infrastructure, and then wind up everything, uh, managing the vendors, the ISPs, and all. So I thought, okay, why not have our own space? So I ran a space in Dharamshala for a few months. But then I decided to travel and I went to Vietnam, lived there for some time. Um, when I came back to India, government of Goa invited me to advise them on, attracting more digital nomads to the state. So I worked with them for some time. That didn't work out. The government was too slow to implement the ideas. So I said, okay, let me start something on my own. It should start somewhere. So that's how Nomadga was born. So we have a co-working, co-living place here in Goa. Um, it's a small space, but we have very tightly knit community, and we run a lot of events. So as Shashi said, we are also somewhere at the intersection of hospitality and not necessarily entrepreneurship, but more focused on digital nomadism and you know freelancers and remote teams. So yeah, that's about me.
That's interesting. So, coming from the traveler community and entrepreneurs and hospitality background as well, it has been very much affected by the COVID-19. So, are you coping up with it, Mayur as well as Shashi? And what are your plans ahead? How do you take up this time to grow ahead?
Shall I go first?
Sure.
Okay, so it was really sudden. In January we had 100% occupancy, and then there were people who were planning to stay for 3 months, and suddenly, the lockdown started in March. A lot of people took the evacuation flights, went back home. So it's been like it took us a little while to process all that was happening around. But then, in this time, I think our focus has been on reducing costs, renegotiating the contracts, uh, making sure that our community, whoever is here, they are well taken care of. And then, those who are not here, they continue to be connected, engaged with the uh, whole idea of Nomad Gaon.
Mm-hmm.
And we have been fortunate that a lot of our community members, they are actively supporting us through this time. They're just uh, booking for the future, or they're just sending us some money over uh, without asking. So that's nice. uh, so I think when it comes to managing through difficult times, I think it's all about relationships with your vendors, with your community, with your employees, with your you know with your co-founders.
Exactly. And over to you, Shashi. How
Yes,
has it been for Ripper Startup House?
I mean it's just hit us like it was not a like a bag of sand on our faces, right? So it's quite intense. A lot of us never even expected. I mean, um, to tell you the fact, we just had finished our global sort of strategy outside in January, offsite in January in Bali, and then we all sort of had we'd come back to our own spaces and looking at how do we sort of hire people and grow spaces and put on new spaces. We have about two spaces that are in the pipeline to be launched, one in Austin and one in Lisbon. And yeah, so this is this is something that nobody has been, nobody can plan for something like this. So I keep repeating this
Yes.
statement. In a lot of these talks that I'm going and doing, which we seem to be doing a lot these days, obviously, which is good, is we're in a sort of a no map land, or a, whatever you call it as, because there's no map to get out of a situation like this.
Mm-hmm.
There have been historical data or instances to tell you that this is probably what's going to happen in the future, or this is how we could come out of it. So, the only thing that we have right now is, our intuition, instincts, and stars to look up to navigate. I mean, basically, stars are our intuition and instincts, right? So, it's a tough situation. There are a lot of businesses that are, shutting down, uh, especially, small companies, which we were till about last year. If this was to happen to us last year, we were called tribe theory, and I don't know how we could have handled this. Lucky for us, we sort of into the 2020, we got some investment and acquired by another larger venture network, which is the Draper. Then we rebranded ourselves. Lucky for us, we had a narrow escape. But a lot of small businesses which depend on their small bunch of customers to keep them alive and keep this infrastructure running, especially people who are using it as lifestyle businesses, they will really, really go through a lot of tough times in these kind of situations. So, as Mayur was talking, so the way we are coping up with also big or small is, sitting down with landlords, renegotiating contracts, sort of going back deep into sort of our own belief system and trying to understand the real what is the problem that we really wanted to solve, and how do we sort of solve that problem with all our spaces still being under lockdown. So there has been a huge shift moving all our efforts online. We have started developing a lot of communities, virtual communities online. Ashish maybe can drop a link about those communities. These are Slack channels with people from different parts of the world talking about how they can support each other during these times. And at the same time, we sort of have gone overdrive on our online initiatives like education programs and webinars and things like that all over the world again. Some of our spaces have sort of hunkered down themselves into these sort of COVID accelerators where people are coming out and brainstorming on different ideas, working on different business plans, and helping each other during the process. So, there is a lot of interesting ways that we are seeing things are evolving, right? Based on the kind of place that you go, the kind of country or city you go into, the audience are different, hence sort of needs are different, and then you see the behavior also being different because of that. So yeah, I mean, we are also one of those many million people, billions of businesses or millions of businesses that are sort of affected by it, and we are coping up with this 1 week at a time, sometimes one day at a time.
Exactly. And even if the lockdown ends, there would not be the post corona time, there would be the with corona time, because it will take a lot of time to get back to normal. So, being in the hospitality industry and traveling yourself, seeing the traveler community, there would be definitely changes in the way people would travel in the coming days. They wouldn't want to prefer going to very crowded places where there are a lot of tourists. It would more of be secluded and under tourism. So what do you have to say about the trends which would change after the things get better? Over to you, Mayur.
Yeah, so interestingly, I wrote a blog post today around the same topic because I thought I'm taking notes anyway, so why not write a blog post? I'll share that in due time. Uh,
Definitely.
so yeah, the travel industry is definitely restructuring. It's not gonna be the same, at least for next 1 2 years till the vaccine comes out, till it reaches masses. Uh, the way I look at it is, a lot of things will change. First thing is, uh, people would prefer to stay longer in smaller communities, avoiding crowds. That's there. Second thing is, the cost of flying, because there would be social distancing measures. A lot of airlines will go bankrupt. So the cost of flying is going to go up. Uh, so how travelers or digital nomads will cope up with this is they would, instead of covering 6 different places in a year, they'll probably spend longer time in 3 places. Um, so when it comes to choosing the places to travel to, uh, the visas will be very important from here on. I mean, they were important so far, but from now on, because if people want to save money and still live a good life, they need to have longer visas in place so that they can spend longer time in countries. So India, thankfully, Indian visa has been good since last year. Now India has 5 year e-visa, so people can stay here for up to 180 days in one entry. So things like this will matter a lot hereafter. And then when it comes to stay options, I think hostels definitely, because hostels have a lot of shared places and the bathroom is shared and you're sharing the dorm. So they may have to reorganize. We also have a dorm and we are thinking of reorganizing that into a private suite. So I think these changes are going to happen over next 1 or 2 years in travel industry.
Indeed. And over to you, Shashina.
Thank you.
What do you see?
I think Mayur's got some very interesting points there. Um, so, firstly, for us, I think we sort of sit at a very interesting positioning because we've been very clear as to what we are positioning ourselves as. And since the beginning, it's always been about standing for the community of entrepreneurs and creators and building the ecosystem around it. So we had a very strong theme that has sort of anchored their entire business into anchored our business too, right? So Um, so I think that why I sort of said that is because a lot of our we can quickly sort of pivot from depending on people who are traveling from outside of the countries and coming from international borders to people who are quickly within the network and within the communities who could potentially use our spaces. Why we want to use our spaces is because people entrepreneurship is a global concept, and there are a lot of people that are going to be turning entrepreneurial post COVID sort of situation, and then they all need support and help, and we could sort of our spaces could develop as those residencies for people to come in and experiment ideas and find their partners or some traction, just to get that community sort of feeling that goes along with it. My sort of view on the overall industry in general is a little not very sort of aggressive or positive, I might say, because this is going to have a cascading effect. The economic effect is I constantly keep saying that this is just an earthquake, right? The tsunami is yet to come. The tsunami is still brewing. It's going to take another couple of weeks or months even for us to start feeling the impact of what is happening here today. The economic impacts can really be very, very deep. Having said that, a lot of behaviors will have to change. So, just to give you a context, in 1945, the just after the world came out of the World War II, that whole year was sort of looked at as a concept called zero year. You should look it up. It's a very interesting concept. So zero year is where they said, okay, everything in this year doesn't matter. We start fresh. Like a lot of businesses were blown into pieces, and humanity was in helter skelter. Our politics, democracy, our value systems, entire thing was basically questioned. So the humanity sort of after 1945 built a lot of these things back up again to where we have come to right now, which is including the abuse of capitalism in general. So so we are in a situation like that. I feel this is my personal opinion. Obviously, is that we probably might be in a position like that going forward from here on. We have to rewrite a lot of different rules and a lot of different unnecessary travel and excessive consumption and destruction of nature and things like that might become a little less important, and even governments might end up sort of overtaxing such behaviors going forward, so that might end up reducing a lot of people doing unnecessary travel for the sake of lifestyle reasons. um, so what happens to co-living spaces? So then the co-living spaces needs to be sort of move on and progress into co-living 2.0 kind of a model, because we're still in co-living 1.0 sort of a concept. I was having a discussion with a few of my friends. I was in another panel discussion around the co-living industry in a couple of days back in Europe, and um, people who basically are looking at co-living, there are two kinds of people who what I learned from, who are essentially looking at as digital nomads or co-living spaces, is one is a bunch of people who are traveling for a particular purpose, right? I want to figure something out. I want to travel because I want to explore. There are different reasons why people travel. And there are another bunch of people who become digital nomads, or rather becomes go into co-living spaces, is because it's economical. It's infrastructure is plug and play. I don't have to worry too much about buying stuff. It's also sort of cool to be around a bunch of people who are doing something interesting. So India has its own sort of maybe a very early stage co-living concept, is what we used to call as the paying guest accommodations. Right? So that's what we used to do. And we have sort of progressed from there on to come to where we are today here. So the West sort of calls it the co-living. In a sense, the true value, the West calls it the co-living, and in India used to have something like this called the paying guest concept. Now that probably needs to be redefined. Well, yeah, I mean, the industry is going to be questioned hard. We all have to be looking and thinking, how do we sort of adapt ourselves to the new normal, and what the new normal looks like is something that we'll keep evolving as we keep learning about. Um, So I wish, I hope I answered your question, because I don't know if I can sort of say, hey, this is the 10 things that's going to happen, so hence you do this, because nobody really knows. I mean, really, we're all in the dark here, and then, sort of figure out what goes on day to day and day after day.
Yes, it's all about observation and seeing the trends and just predicting what we can foresee.
I think
Nobody
it's
can
a
tell.
lot of point of views now, I mean, which point of view do you subscribe? The way you look at the world, and then sort of that thread evolves, and then, gives you a certain predictions. But if you talk to a hardcore banker or a capitalist or a real estate guy, he or she may not have the same response towards the industry. So
Yeah. And
Yeah,
indeed,
I mean, there is no precedent. There is no, we don't know anything about what's going to happen. Uh, so I think it's safe to assume that it's time to slow down and rethink the priorities, keep the eyes open, see how the world is moving, how the politicians, governments are responding, and then take actions accordingly.
after all, we all are sailing on the same COVID boat right now. So no one can just steer it and give their opinions exactly of what will happen. And before I move on, I would like to ask our audience that if you have any questions, you can just write it down on the chat, and these would be answered in the last 10 minutes of the session. So just bring on your questions if you have, all our viewers, please. So moving forward, I would like to ask that the current situation is seeing a lot of job reductions and furloughs and people losing their work. This is also giving rise to people acquiring more of digital skills and becoming remote entrepreneurs, right? So the trend is moving towards more of remote work. Right now, many of us have been forced to work remotely, while others have already been digital nomads since long. But some of them are willingly taking on the nomadic movement and moving towards being remote entrepreneurs. So, what do you have to say about the upcoming remote entrepreneurs who will, steer their ship beyond the pandemic? Over to you, Mayur.
Yeah, so I feel remote work is definitely going to be mainstream. There would be initial hiccups, but you know, the longer the lockdowns and epidemic lasts, the more used to people will get to the idea of remote work. Uh, so over the next couple of years, we'll see the change happening. It will. TCS has already said that by
75%.
2035. Yeah. Uh, in terms of the structure of employment, I feel that companies are not going to hire aggressively year after, because they'll be cautious. They'll rely on gig economy. They'll rely on freelancers until they get the confidence. Even though things start getting back to normal, they won't be jumping too much onto. So this should definitely give rise to people trying new things, learning new skills, trying different ideas, trying entrepreneurship, uh, and remote being the norm. I think it's all good for. But we should be looking at, the change was already happening. It's just that the COVID-19 accelerated the change. We are moving towards world without jobs because automation is coming in, AI is kicking in, a lot of jobs are going to get lost, autonomous vehicles are coming in. So looking at all of these things, I feel that we should really be looking at society as a whole, or how we are going to look at communities, how we are going to look at uh, a world without jobs or too much of leisure time. Uh, so yeah, entrepreneurship would be the first response, but over the time, I think we should really be looking at community in a different angle.
Exactly, Mayur. And Shashi, as you already have an accelerator for startups and entrepreneurs, what is your take on the current remote entrepreneurship, which is going to grow over the time?
I think remote entrepreneurship is what probably is to a large extent called as digital nomads, right? Or your gig workers. Now, gig workers were sort of early adopters of the society who went out and showed how these things could be done in terms of not having to have a job and sort of being very lean in their lifestyles and a lot of travel and things like that. So I think in the as Mayur was talking, a lot of these decisions were sitting on the fringes because there were some age-old contracts and age-old old school business leaders who were thinking that it was better for me to have my 200, 300 people sitting in the office every day, even though they have to travel for 2 hours one way to get to office. Because it's just the way they know how to manage people. They just that's the way they know how to manage these businesses. Now there has been some controlled experiments in organizations as well, and a lot of the infrastructure had been laid out, but people were not adapting to it as they should have. Now, as Mayur was talking about, a cosmic push, so to say, for all of us to sort of get into that direction as quickly as possible, and we all are doing it. So they may not necessarily be called as digital nomads anymore. This is just going to be distributed workforce. This might be just digital workforce. A lot of people who are employed or who are unemployed are all going to be working remote. So that sort of trickles down into not having a big, large office spaces, transportation solutions, food in the canteen, and not whatnot. All those kind of stuff is going to get questioned. On the contrary, I also sort of feel that because there is this rush to get into going digital, at least in the last 4 to 5 weeks, there has been a lot of things that have not been tested right. People never got an opportunity to test it because this was not a time to test. This was a time to fire. Not thinking is firing, right? So a lot of this now will start to test. It becomes like a testing ground, like a mass testing ground to see how behaviors sort of which of these sort of behaviors will adapt to these new changes and take these technologies forward, or which of these will sort of have found enough data to say it won't work. So it can work both ways, right? So people were all very aggressive about saying that now everything is going to go digital. Universities are going to become online. Where transportation is going to go do this, and online deliveries. So like everybody, all of a sudden, human tendency is to exaggerate a lot of things, and that's where a lot of sensationalization comes into play. But this might also be an interesting way to say which of it can really go remote and online, and which of it needs a little more hand holding to go really online and remote. And then, the question after that would be does it really have to even go remote? So these are sort of two threads that I see in digitalization or the future of work sort of space. Yeah. But then there are a lot of these solopreneurs that I see more than entrepreneurs who I call as solopreneurs. In fact, we at Draper Startup House, we're sort of running an acceleration boot camp for 3 weeks to tell people how to become solopreneurs, because a lot of unemployment, a lot of people are going to come out into the market now not knowing where to go look for a job. The one thing that we want to tell all of them is that, hey, you know what, sit down, look at what you have in terms of skills and experience, and see how can you sort of use that as a resource to go into market to make yourself a living. So this sort of boot camp helps people through those processes. So yeah, then everybody's going to be an entrepreneur now. I mean, that's how it's going to be for a few years.
So people are just using their skills, trying to go online and brushed up digitally, and they will be like future entrepreneurs through these programs also, and own learning as well. So Mayur, I would like to ask that you also have your own like community, the physical community. So how are the members coping up, and how do you plan to take it ahead with the community members beyond the pandemic?
Yeah. So our community is very diverse in terms of, where they are based or the home country they come from. So everybody is reacting in in a different way based on where they are, where their family is based. But then what we are trying to do is we are trying to keep the flock together. Um, I personally tried to talk to everyone. We have sort of, we are planning to have like weekly video calls just to keep a check on the community, keep check on members. Um, but apart from that, I think, the first reaction, especially in March, was panic. But now that I'm talking to people, I see that the moods are changing. They're accepting this as a reality, accepting this time as a opportunity to slow down, think. Uh, so yeah, in terms of mental health, I see there is a lot of improvement uh, among the community members for last few weeks.
It's a good thing. And over to you, Shashi. How do you see your community? How are they responding to it? And how are you steering it forward?
Our community has a different kind of a problem because most of the people that we sort of call our community is not only digital nomads or solopreneurs, but there's a lot of these medium to large size entrepreneurs as well who interact and interface with us. So they're all, working with teams of, I don't know, 50 to 100, or, whatever those numbers are. And, in the sort of fringes of closing around the funding or sort of bootstrapping the businesses to get some, market validation, many different cases like that for these guys. So now all of a sudden they all are struggling themselves because statistics say about 40% to 50% of the startups are going to get wiped out, this process. It's a huge number. I mean, I'm talking about these numbers coming in from portfolios of funds that means people have raised money from investors, but still after that, these companies might get washed out. So talk about people who have got like no investments and it's a pure product based play, they might go through a lot of problems. So our job as community developers, because we're not just a co-living space, but as I said, we sit at the intersection of community as well as the space. Our job is to sort of try and see how can we address some of these pain points of a community by keeping them engaged, by giving them access to some interesting people and knowledge and information so that they could learn from these things and try to adapt it as much as quickly as they can. So they're responding to that pretty well. We are sort of running these COVID acceleration sort of partnerships with people who are doing it. So people are actively participating, in those kinds of programs. Yeah, they're responding well, but also entrepreneurship community in general is very, very sort of aggressive, upbeat community, right? So they fall, they get up, they run, they fall, they get up, they run. So they're sort of used to that cycle. So they all are, you'll be surrounded by people who are constantly aggressive and positive. Probably I'm the only one who's very neutral in this community, but otherwise they seem to be responding to it pretty well. Yeah.
That's a good thing. And Mayur, what do you have to say about the Indian digital nomad community? Because it is relatively new in India that people are becoming digital nomads. So they will have their own apprehensions of traveling, going out, and especially the people who go to Southeast Asia, being Indians. So, what do you have to say about the Indian trends in being a digital nomad? What do you foresee?
Yeah. Uh, so because I have seen the community evolving in India, uh, I feel that it's an exciting time for the whole Indian digital nomad community because you know you put in remote work, companies are going remote, then there won't be enough jobs, so a lot of people are going to turn freelancers. So putting all of this together, I feel that the community is going to grow. Uh, we did an interesting experiment, because we were not sure how many Indian digital nomads would use our services. So we sort of put in different accommodation options to match their budget, and we are seeing some traction there. In the first month we did not have any Indian, and then now it's almost you know in March, February, March, it was about 60-40. Uh, about the travel trends in Indian digital nomads, because a lot of them would be first timers. I feel that, like I did back in 2015, I was low on budget, so I chose to travel within India first, and then I started Southeast Asia. Uh, so I see a lot of Indian digital nomads, especially the new ones, uh, to explore places in India and uh, try to work from different places. And if you add the increasing flight costs and the state of Indian passport into it, I feel that that's the domestic market going to, especially the operators within India, they're going to get a lot of traction over next couple of years until this. And demographics is an advantage with Indians, right? We have younger population. A lot of people are not afraid uh, for good or for bad. Uh, so I see that they'll get over this quickly and then they'll reorganize their life.
We surely hope they do. And as you said, that the young people are taking risks and they are not afraid. So definitely, even the Indian digital nomads would, you know, go and try out domestically first before they step out of the country. Okay, so we have a question here for Shashi. That is, how do you think the investor ecosystem is going to perceive solopreneurs or single partner entrepreneurs? We have this question from Kumar Vagish.
It's a good question. The question that probably needs to be asked, sort of a follow up question to the question, is why do you even need investors for if you're a solo entrepreneur? Right? You necessarily don't need, when you start off, when you're in your solo zone, when you have gone solo, so to say, you don't need investors. You need to sort of, the whole idea about going solo is about trying to understand how do you sort of jumpstart your life with very minimum investments. Try to see what you have immediately as in terms of knowledge and resources, and can make something out of that. Imagine a scenario where in the 80s or 90s, you have passed out of your college and then you thought of doing any options, when you would sort of go and take a franchisee or something, and then you open up a store or whatever, and then you need to money, give deposits for the franchisees, because back in the days, the options were very limited for people who don't become entrepreneurs on their own accord. So hence they needed that capital. So then access to capital was difficult. So then you had to depend on banks for debts and stuff like that, or you got to liquidate one of your own assets or to borrow from your own family to start it. But in today's scenario, you sort of take the physical layer out of the scene and then read the internet. Right? You have all of this knowledge, you have all of the skills. What can you really do in the internet to reach out to those few customers that who probably think going to be needing your services? So there is no question of an investor at that sort of gotten enough traction, and then when you've sort of come to a point of scaling, that's where you probably will need an investor to come into the scene, and then you're not a solopreneur anymore. Then you sort of have moved on to become an entrepreneur. So I would sort of tell the person to not be worried about investors. This is just the idea of being a solopreneur is that you need to break away from the structure of investment, that framework that people constantly depend on. That also becomes a huge hindrance for people to try things out. So take that out of the way, and I think you'll see what you can really do.
Can I add something to this, Indrani?
Sure, Mayur.
Yeah. So I'm a financial analyst by profession. Over the last 10 years, I've been, analyzing startups, established companies. Uh, so the playground hereafter is going to be very different from what we have seen in last decade, right? Because over the last decade, there was a excessive risk-taking behavior from the investor side. There were 300-year business plans and whatnot. All those, sandcastles have fallen now, right? Even the good ones like Airbnb, there are questions about their future. So in this time, I feel it's time to go lean. It's time to uh, bootstrap, cut costs, show that you can manage this, show that you're profitable, show that you can make money, and then go to investors to ask for money to scaling up. It won't be like what happened over last couple of years where, you know, uh, loss-making startups went ahead, painted a rosy picture. Nobody's going to believe in that rosy picture anymore. Right?
Indeed. And we have one more question. So right now we were talking about solopreneurs, entrepreneurs. This is for the about the individuals who are making a shift from full-time employees to contingent workers. What do you feel would be the challenges they would face while this transformation takes place?
Who do you want to go?
Either of you could answer, you or Shashi. Shashi, you can answer.
Oof. It's tough because I've the risk of sounding sort of rude. I've never been an employee, so I don't know what an employee mindset looks like. Uh, uh, you know, but can you repeat the question again?
The question is, what are the challenges for individuals who would be transforming from full-time employees into contingent workers? What challenges would they face in the transition and transformation?
I think some amount of the isolation that we're craving for right now could also become a bit of a challenge in the future because a lot of these people who have been employed for a long durations of time are only used to that ecosystem, the ecosystem of the colleagues, and then that infrastructure, and then that a lot of people thrive on that kind of an infrastructure. Now all of a sudden you don't have any of that, so and then you are also going remote on top of that, right? So I'm guessing contingent also is remote by nature. So there will be some of these issues, self-organizing, working without managers telling you what to do, sort of being a self-starter, trying to know how to sort of develop disciplines and routines around getting up and getting things done, managing if you're in a family environment, you got to sort of balance your personal life as well as professional life. Already some people are sort of complaining about, oh, this is like becoming a 24 hours all the time online sort of a situation, working from home. So some of these kind of issues might come up. You don't have HR, you don't have counseling, you don't have all of those kinds of additional paraphernalia that you had in your life anymore. So there's a lot of the focus sort of now has to turn into your own self-development, and that has to be your own initiative. It's not going to come in from somebody else through training programs that used to be organized in the companies before. It's not going to come through your sessions with your leaders who are going to sit down and talk to you about your strengths and weaknesses and help you sort of cope with it. All of those has to be now self-driven. So I think shift is going to be something I would say people will have to keep in mind.
We have Mayur here online.
Yeah. So I've been
Yeah.
on both the sides, right? I've been an employee, I've been a freelancer. So I feel the biggest change or biggest difference would be changing the mindset into, uh, so when you are going to office, you don't really think about your time in dollars, right? When you're a freelancer, when you're getting paid by hour, you automatically start thinking about uh, how much am I losing if I'm wasting an hour or two. And that the whole process makes you lean and you know agile. Uh, second biggest difference is our second challenge is adaptability.
Just a minute, Mayur. I think there's some disturbance. Yeah, which has to be muted. Yes, Mayur.
Yeah. So second challenge is adaptability. When you're uh, used to office setting, 9 to 5 job, uh, you're not really spending a lot of time beyond your focus. Uh, you're traveling a couple of hours every day, so by the end of the day, all the energy and not much time left.
To mute the movie or whatever is playing.
Yeah. Nakul, I think, can you mute yourself?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, Mayur.
Yeah. So
Please continue.
I was talking about adaptability. So when you're working from office, you spend a couple of hours every day commuting, then you spend 8 to 9 hours at work. At the end of the day, you don't have much energy left, so you don't spend as much time as you want to on reskilling, upskilling. So
Amit, could you please mute the screen of someone named admin?
I think it's
Can you please mute whoever there's admin? Yeah, thank you. Please go ahead, Mayur.
yeah. So the shift from living for the weekends to living every day would be a challenging one. Like learning over the weekends and learning every day, spending time with family over the weekends, uh, compared to spending time with them every day. Uh, so a lot of shifts will happen from the weekend lifestyle to, you know, everyday lifestyle. You need to manage your schedule better. Uh, all these challenges will happen in the first uh, couple of months at least.
Exactly. And I think we have one more question. Governments are asking employers to give remote employment to the citizens of the same country. How much is this going to challenge the Indian freelance market? Earlier, people used to hire Indian freelancers much, but with more of remote employees in all the countries, so how is the Indian freelancer market going to be affected?
That's a good question. That's a very good question. Um, Onshoring is going to be a new reality, right? Because now let's sort of look, stop and look back at what's going to happen now. With you know, America has already spent about $10 trillion. It's going to be spending about $10 trillion to get out of the situation, and their economy is at $30 trillion in size. And UK is, spending, I don't know, 300, $400 billion euros to sort of help these economies. So essentially what I'm trying to say here is by the time we get done with all of this, we are looking at about a global debt of about, say, 15 to $20 trillion. Some people are even guessing almost $30 trillion, which is the size of the American economy, an entire year's economy, right? So that means we have an entire year which is basically washed out, economically speaking. Now, obviously, what happens? Where does this money come from when you're bailing anybody out? It's obviously coming in from government. Government is borrowing money, or it is dipping into its reserves, or it is creating bonds for people to sort of, go in and create this liquidity. when you do that, the governments have to recover this money to keep the market going. That means they have to tax more, they have to create more employments, they have to create more jobs so that people can get employed and pay their taxes so that the government earns its revenue. So now people are talking about bringing in their manufacturing other jobs back into their own countries because it is necessary right now. Supply chain has been a security concern, national security concern now. So supply chains are bringing in, coming back to countries. So a lot of this is what a lot of people are predicting is going to happen, right? Also, in this process, the rates of employment drop too because people are desperate and people are competitive in the market, and the cost is low because you don't have spaces and then all those overheads that you had to sort of go through before to keep a business running now all could be taken off with remote workers in your own country, your own people, because that becomes a national interest to sort of revive the economy of these countries. So there will be a lot of to say that you know uh, this is what you have to do because that sort of becomes becomes a political and a sort of a humanitarian debate, or rather some sort of it goes against open market philosophies, but it will be taxed. There are other ways governments knows how to do this. It will be taxed in multiple ways, so that the companies will be forced to bring back their jobs back into their own markets. Like Donald Trump had already been talking about this since the time he's come into power. That hey, American companies need to sort of bring back their jobs into America. They're already talking about not giving out financial aid to companies that are not registered in America. Companies like Apple that are sitting on $3-4 trillion in cash reserves now are going to be pressed hard to spend that money to create employment, to create all of that stuff. Otherwise, they'll say, "I'm going to increase your taxation. You're falling into a higher tax slab." So it's not very good to be sort of super rich also at this time and also super poor at this time. So somewhere being in the middle class sort of range might be just the right place to be. I don't know. Who knows?
Exactly. As you said, that countries are going to be more self-sustaining and not depend too much on offshoring, right? Over to you, Mayur. What do you have to say about this, the Indian
Yes. So
freelancer community?
I think there was a question about globalization. Somebody asked
Yes.
something about globalization. Uh, for I believe that globalization, as we knew so far, kind of dead. Even Modi is talking about being self-sufficient. A lot of countries are talking about being self-sufficient. Even the local communities. I live in a village, and the community here is talking about growing their own vegetables, growing own food, to make sure that we don't have any supply chain shocks. With all of this, nationalism and restrictive policies coming into play, uh, I feel that at some point it will be hard to apply for jobs abroad. The same way, in physical jobs, it's so hard to get a job somewhere outside unless uh, you study there or you're exceptionally good at what you do. But then, India as a country is a big market in itself, right? So even if you're not looking at jobs, remote jobs from abroad, you would probably cater to the domestic market. It won't pay as much, but then with not a lot of you know foreign goods coming in, and your expenses would perhaps be low because the range would come down and all. So I think it's a zero-sum game in the end. Just that with the population that we have, it's gonna be competitive. but it's been competitive anyway. So I don't see much change there.
So, as you said, the freelancer community in India will thrive, but putting Shashi's words there, they would be like the middle class and not so super rich right there. And over the time, this will happen. We have one more question here, which was asked earlier. It says, earlier remote work in the pre-corona times were usually related to travel. But beyond the pandemic, what is the chance of remote work being related to travel or just about working from home?
No, I think that's a misconception to begin with. Remote work has been uh, it has since the advent of internet and the offshoring and the outsourcing sort of stuff. The trend was sort of put into place then, and even if you go back into the manufacturing economy, even then this has always been a concept through JVs and sort of other manufacturing practices to sort of pool resources and production lines from different parts of the world to bring them together and assemble it in developed nations to keep the cost low and the volumes high. It's got nothing to do with travel. It's just that the millennials turned it into something about travel because of they want. I was just talking about this to somebody about a couple of days back as well. That um, your the way I look at digital nomads is like the backpackers who have sort of evolved into something more something more cool and something more um, sort of sort of yeah, that's the next version 2.0 of the backpackers which the millennials probably
They
brought up.
can sustain their lifestyle on the road,
Exactly, right?
being backpackers.
Even if you look at the backpackers, if you go back and study the history of evolution, human beings in a lot of parts of the world have been nomadic for a very long time. So being nomad is not very new to humanity in general. It just keeps on, sort of developing into different versions as we keep going along with time and with infrastructure just getting, developed and changed. So it won't be about travel. I think it's going to be a lot about the way you see regularly the way that things are working in the world today. A lot of those if you were to open a laptop, if you have to open a laptop to do your work, and then you had to go to an office to do that, is what is going to get questioned to begin with. That's what is going to get questioned. If somebody who loves farming and want to get into farming, you cannot 100% do farming online. Right? You have to go there. You can monitor a lot of things online, but you cannot plow the field online. You got to go to work physically. There are a lot of manufacturing jobs as well might turn digital in terms of inspection, security, quality, and then a lot of AI coming in to sort of run these production lines. A lot of that is going to happen. But again, guys, listen, what we're talking about here is about 10, 15, 20 years from now. It's not going to be like you come out of this COVID situation and tomorrow you're all going to be going digital or all of these changes are going to happen. And then these are also predictions basically by studying some of the behaviors of human being and societies over the past. So take this with a pinch of salt. Take this as a Saturday evening entertainment and nothing more than that. But I do not necessarily link going remote and travel. Sort of travel might come out because you've got a lot more geographic independence now. So you might want to sort of travel around, see the world, and do work from different parts of the. Also, that's because cities are getting too noisy and polluted and stuff like that. So people want to escape from cities. So there are many different behavioral trends that lead you to sort of becoming a nomad and travel, but it's got nothing to do with only travel.
Mayur, what's your take on it?
Yeah. So the way I look at it is, remote work is broad, right? Remote work is the offering, and being a digital nomad is just one of the use cases. Uh, Remote work gives you the location independence, and you choose what you want to do with it. Some people choose to uh, stay at home, save money, spend time with family. Some people choose to go back to their hometown, spend time with parents. some people choose to travel, and those who choose to travel are called digital nomads. And Andrew just said something about being a slow mad. Even I, now that I've been doing this for a while, even I call myself a slow mad. I like to spend months, quarters, years at a place and then move on to the next. I don't know how long I will be in Goa, but it's not going to be as, the travel is not going to be as frequent as I did when I was single. And yeah. So, as Shashi said, there would be some people going remote and choosing to travel, uh, but not everyone will do that. I have a lot of friends who are back home. They don't go anywhere. They even tell their brothers to go and get vegetables. Uh, so, yeah.
We have one more question from Andrew, and we'll take this as our last question. So it says, in your experiences, have you seen guests or those coming into your sphere of influence being a financial burden due to the lack of adequate insurance?
I think it's a very good question, because insurance is very, very important. If you, let's say, for example, India is not one of those very expensive countries when it comes to healthcare still, right? It's still affordable. But if you go into countries like Europe, or if you travel into other, sort of developed countries, health, medical can become really expensive if something goes wrong. And then, your travel insurances last for about 30 days tops, or, I don't know, maybe more than that also. I don't know how much the premium is, but it's a travel insurance. It's not, they're expecting you to come back to your home base once after that duration is done. It's usually linked to sort of, I think, the number of days the maximum visa limits are and stuff like that in different countries. So, and then, they're expecting you to go to if you even apply for an insurance online, you'll see that they'll ask you, what visa do you have? US, okay, how many days? 30 days. They'll give you an insurance only days, only covering America. If you decide to go from there to say, I don't know, Russia, you will probably have to buy another insurance. So I know that there are a few people in the world who are trying out these nomad insurance programs, which I think is going to be very interesting. It's also very important because a lot of people don't travel. Paranoia of not having an insurance in a first world country is very, very high. In India, it's still not a big, sort of a thing that, oh shit, I don't have an insurance. No, people are okay with not having insurances. I'm not saying that in a critical manner, but I'm just saying it as a fact. But in developed nations, you can't really live without an insurance. So depends again where you are. But in any case, it doesn't matter if you are a digital worker or a remote worker or not. But insurance is a must, I think. And having something specifically catered to digital nomads and sort of location independent workforce will definitely help. That flexibility is very, very important.
Mayur, would you like to add something to it?
Yeah. So, immigration, I think, a lot of countries don't allow people without insurance, right? Uh, and now with the COVID situation, a lot of people falling sick in different countries. I think insurance is going to be a mandate. It is going to be mandatory. We had a couple of people uh, who were insured, and their flights got cancelled. And luckily, because they were insured, they could get the money back. Uh, so, I cannot imagine a situation where you don't have an insurance. All the money that you have put in flights go away because they're not giving you the refund back. They're giving you credit, and then the evacuation flights, they're too expensive, so you can't afford them. Uh, so I think insurance is going to be the uh, required feature. It is required. Like, I never travel without insurance, but it's going to be very serious from now on.
Yes, indeed. Anyway, having insurance would be beneficial for the person itself.
Very
And
very
are there any?
about insurance
Yeah, Shashi?
forward. insurance itself is it's self-descriptive, right? It's an insurance. But now I think real-time health data becomes very, very important. Insurance costs are going to go up. There are a lot of developed nations are going a lot of restrictions for people to cross into different. So they will demand for on sort of online real-time health information of people who are coming into their countries, um, which also opens up another argument about data privacy and personal health security and privacy areas and stuff like that. I'm not going to touch that, but uh, it's going to become a must. I mean, this industry is going to go bananas, right? They're going to put in so much importance on data and health information real time. They will all sort of tie that down to the insurance, because all of this data will probably come onto some sort of an open platform where all of these guys will share information. So then you will probably be, they might even bring in instruments where they, you know, somewhere link insurance to taxes, and then if you don't have insurances, you pay more taxes. All of these kind of things are possible.
Indeed. And any more questions from our viewers? Last one. I believe we've answered all the questions. Someone had also asked about the sectors which would boom post-COVID. The last one answers. What's your take on it?
I think healthcare is going to see a lot of changes. Broadly, I think healthcare is going to see a lot of changes. Again, these are my point of view, guys. There's no empirical data to back this up. I'm just sort of based on my gut feel. Uh, so I think we will probably see a lot more reverse migration from big cities to, especially knowledge workforce will probably end up migrating back to where they came from, or rather to neighborhoods which are outside the city, because you don't need to be in the cities anymore. So hence you will have different kind of housing and living needs that could bring give birth to that from the change. Mobility is going to become very micro, I feel, very personal. Transportation requirements within urban areas or whatever it is might become very, very personal, which means you have kick scooters and, sort of very personal transportation solutions might come into play. You will probably see a lot of automation for health reasons that might kick in. You've got Alexa already into your doors, so they might have a lot more sensors and measures and reading stuff that insurance companies or governments might start demanding you have in your homes. So you will see a lot more connected homes, a lot more IoT driven solutions that could come in. These are potentially the things that I think might, sort of the direction. But you also have to understand that there will be a lot of destruction in the other a lot of industries that we will have to start shutting down because of its. Look at oil industry itself, right? Fossil fuel and oil itself is to begin with. Who thought oil, such a strong commodity, go down the way it has gone down? So all of these kind of stuff. Like, my big fear is that, are we going to now move from gold, from fiat to gold standards back again? If that happens, then yeah, there's a lot of different things. Yeah, I would sort of stop at that.
Mayur, what do you have to say about the edtech industry as well? Amit has put up a question with all the sectors which are booming.
It's definitely gonna boom, but I think the transition will happen over the time. It won't be right now. There is knee-jerk reaction about learning online and all, and I don't think we are there yet. Apart from that, I feel when people work from home or work remotely, giving them the feel of workspace, or the feel of having people around. That would matter a lot. And then the VR will come into play when you talk about these things. Then COVID has given rise to contactless deliveries. So we'll see a lot of drone deliveries and robo deliveries coming in. But yeah, overall, the trend is more moving towards tech. Agriculture will boom now because a lot of people, especially in India, a lot of places have seen supply shocks. And in Goa, now they're talking about bringing agriculture back to Goa. Things like this will happen. Focus will move more towards the basic necessities, the required things to live the best life. That's what I feel.
Also about the events and concerts someone has asked.
Take a big hit, I feel. It's going to take a while. It's going to keep this answer short. It's going to take a while for people to come back into a position of public gathering again. I think you will have to wait till a vaccine to come in first. Everybody in the world to have gotten administered and access to vaccine, and then you will start seeing people really coming back. I think coming back to kind of social gatherings that we were used to, like 100,000 people in one event, 200,000 people in one event, all using the same public toilets, all eating and throwing trash and pitching tents and sleeping in festivals. That sort of stuff will at least even maybe 6 to 8 months after the invention of vaccine also. But micro events like that, might also, artists might become very micro right now, playing in cafes and bars and restaurants and those kind of places, which will slowly start to open up again. Also online, as I keep talking about. It's a tough time for events and concerts industry. Yeah, it's a bit of a tough time.
All right, we have all the questions answered, and it was a very great time having to speak to both of you, Mayur and Shashi. As Mayur said, we all are taking it slow, giving it time, and as Shashi said, that we are being neutral, not thinking too much about what's expecting. So that was all about the digital market, digital nomadic scenario beyond the pandemic. Also, we would like to take a picture of all the audience. Amit, would you take a picture for the social media? Amit, am I audible? Let me know when we are done. To everyone for attending this reconnect. It was indeed a having you all. Especially thanks to Shashi and Mayur for giving us such valuable insights. Thank you so much. See you again on the next reconnect.
Thanks, guys.
Yep.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
guys.
Special thanks
Bye.
to Amit and Global Nomad Summit for making this possible.
Good
Thank
job,
you,
man.
Amit.
Thanks, Amit.
Thank you.
All right. See you next time. Bye.